Good morning, everyone. I'm Carol Shanklin, the Dean of the Graduate School. Today we are going to be visiting with you about the requirements and deadlines for graduation and commencement. With me is Miss Angie Fitzenmeyer. Angie is the doctoral specialist in the Graduate School, and she's going to be giving you highlights of important things to remember in preparing for your graduation. All the documents that need to be submitted, a timeline for those, and then we'll be interacting with specific guidelines throughout. Angie?
One of the first things I want to mention is the contacts. The master's students, Dawn Lesperance is for the master's professional programs, and you'll see her email address on the PowerPoint. Lori Grelk, who's also a master specialist who deals with all other master programs, and then also my contact information for the doctorate students. One of the first things I want to mention is the main page of the graduate school, which will be changing in the near future, but the information should pretty much be the same on the page. Of course, you've probably already reviewed the handbook and also the information and deadlines. That's underneath graduation, commencement information and deadlines, and that'll give you the deadlines for graduating that semester, and usually we try to have deadlines up to a year on that. The forms, any of the forms that you need for graduation or completing your degree requirements can be found underneath the student guidelines and forms. And then also electronic theses, dissertations, and reports, and that can be found on our main page also. One of the first things you want to do when you're getting ready to graduate is to make certain that you have your program of study submitted. For the doctoral students, you'll have to have your preliminary examinations completed, and it has to be completed at least 7 months prior to the graduation time that you plan to have your defense. One of the other main things is you will want to contact your outside chairperson and make sure that that individual is still available for your final defense. Make certain that they're not on sabbatical, or make sure that they're still with the university. If you have questions on that, you can contact me, and if you have a situation where that individual is not available, you may send me an email or contact me also, and I'll work with Dr. Shanklin to clear that situation up for you. A very helpful tool is a degree audit reporting system, referred to as DARS, and you can go onto that underneath your ISIS account, and you can look at the courses that you have for your program of study, make certain that all of those courses have been completed. If anything appears as not completed, you'll want to contact either Dawn, Lori, or I so we can help you in preparing most likely a program committee change form, which I will go over later.
As you look at your degree audit, please note if you're doing a thesis, a report, or a dissertation where you have been given incomplete hours, those will appear as all that need to be completed yet, because only courses that have been completed that are graded A through D will actually appear as being completed on the DARS report. The easiest thing to determine, have you taken enough thesis, dissertation hours, is to go to your academic history and then count the total number of hours. Hopefully you did that if it's your last semester before enrolling, but that is your best tool in determining whether you have enrolled in an adequate number of courses. And speaking of enrollment, I'm sure Angie's going to address this, but please be aware that you must be enrolled the semester that you graduate in a minimum of 1 hour.
In order to have your final examination, as Dr. Shanklin had mentioned, you do have to be enrolled for the current semester. Classes do have to be in session. The final examination must be held on the Manhattan campus. And just make sure that you review the deadlines as to when you want to hold that final examination, because you will want to look at the final deadline and move your dates back accordingly.
The only exception to the examinations being administered on the Manhattan campus are for those of you who are completing your entire program by distance. And for those students, there is the form that you complete as a student who's completing a distance course. So since you've completed all your coursework by distance, you're not required to be on campus by the graduate school, but many of your programs will require you to come to Manhattan for your final defense. So you'll want to clarify that with your major professor and program director.
I had mentioned prior to this the committee program committee change form. If there's a course on your program of study that does not match, it could be the number of the course is not matching up. It could be a different title of the course. You will need to complete a program committee change form, removing courses and adding courses or changing courses. Also on this form, if you have any of your committee members that have changed since you've submitted your program of study, you would use this form to make any changes to your committee. The ISIS graduation application is something new this semester. All students that are planning to graduate must complete the ISIS graduation application, which is found on your ISIS account. There is instructions to have how to do that if you go on to your ISIS account, and it will tell you exactly what it needs to be. Now, once you submit an approval form, make certain that you have completed the ISIS graduation application form, because we won't process that approval form until that's been completed.
Why is that important, Angie? Well, what is it, the information on that ISIS graduation application that's so important that we need in the graduate school to help them get the documents they need after graduation?
The important thing is the diploma information, and it's going to ask for the student's diploma name and to be listed on the diploma, and also diploma address to mail that to. And that is a requirement when you're completing that graduation application. You can't go any further in the steps until you complete that information, so the diploma can accurately arrive to you.
Okay, thank you.
The approval form, which is also it's called the Approval to Schedule Final Examination form, that's found on our website, and that has to be completed at least 10 days prior to your final examination. And that will include, as a master's student, your entire committee will have to sign that form, and also as a doctorate student, the outside chairperson has to sign that form. When they sign this form, it's basically indicating if you're doing a thesis or report or a dissertation that they have a copy of that document prior to the final examination. From that form, one of the three of us will send out an email, and it will indicate deadlines. It will also have general information, and it will let you know if there are any other requirements that you still need to complete prior to your final examination. There is a video teleconference form, and that is if you have an individual that's on your committee that's going to have to attend your defense by Skype or something along that line, such as teleconference. That form has to be completed and submitted prior to your final examination. Sequestering, we also have information on the sequestering, and that is found off the Electronic Thesis and Dissertations and Reports website. And that is if you have such as a patent that you don't want to have information released at the time of your graduation, you can request to sequester your document, and normally that's from a time period from 6 months to up to 2 years, and that's submitted to the graduate school, and then Dr. Shanklin will make the final decision on that.
And the reason it's important to get this form in, preferably at the same time that you're submitting your approval form, is that we do not want if it is approved for sequestration, we do not want your thesis dissertation to go into KREX and become a public document. And that can happen if that sequestration form is submitted after the time you submit your electronic thesis or dissertation. So it's very important that you work with your major professor, talk about that as you're finalizing your thesis or dissertation. Is there a justified reason based upon the guidelines on the graduate school website that does that? If you're patenting something, or if there's something that is a copyright that's pending that's very important to protect your intellectual property, then it would be appropriate to submit that, and then I review those to verify that is in fact meets the requirements and the time limit is appropriate for this specific request.
Doctorate students, another form for you would be the Survey of Earned Doctorate form, and that will be found in the checklist, and I will tell you where you can find that in just a little bit. That form must be submitted to the graduate school also, and that can actually, if it's the semester that you're planning on graduating, you can actually complete that during the semester prior to your final examination and submit that to the graduate school as either a PDF and email it to me as an attachment, or you can submit the paper document to 103 Fairchild Hall. From the approval form, there is going to be a ballot sent, the final examination ballot, and for master students, the final examination ballot is sent to your major professor. There is also another ballot that is sent, and that is the electronic theses, dissertations, and reports ballot. And if you're completing this, that will be sent to your major professor. Both of these ballots must be submitted prior to the electronic submission of your ETDR if you're completing an ETDR. If you're not completing an ETDR, make certain that that final examination ballot is submitted to the graduate school by the graduation deadline requirement. Copywriting, I'm going to have Carol discuss copywriting.
Okay. Copywriting is very important in that it is giving credit for previously published work. You've done this through your citations within your review of literature, within your discussion, but copywriting is one that if you're using something like if your thesis or dissertation includes an article that you've published as part of your graduate work, you will have to obtain copyright release from the publisher of that particular manuscript, because when you submitted that manuscript, it was accepted for publication. You transferred your copyright over to the publisher. So you will need to work with the publisher to get that release, and they will give you guidance in exactly how that article can be included within your thesis or report. You may be using copyrighted material such as an instrument that you have used to collect your data. You should have obtained copyright release in advance of doing that, but this is something that you need to have on file should that individual who developed that instrument or that company ask for validation from you and your major professor that copyright was done. On the library website, there's some guidelines on Fair Use Act, and this basically is helping you determine if the content that you are putting in your dissertation or thesis or report should have a copyright release. It is between you and your major professor going through those three-step questions that are there to determine whether or not you need copyright. On the graduate school website, there is information on how to contact the publisher or the author and a sample letter to use. But again, this is something that takes time, so hopefully you've already started that process at this point of the semester. If not, it would be one of the things that you want to do. But again, your major professor will help you in making that final decision of whether what you want to include falls within the Fair Use Act.
Also, you can find information regarding the copywriting under Getting Started on the ETDR webpage. Do you want to go over some of that information also? Yes,
these are examples of copyrighted materials that might be, you'd want to consider whether you needed to do that. I mentioned survey instruments. If they are a commercially based instrument, where like personality tests would be an example, then that company has that copyright. You will need to obtain that in order to use that instrument within your dissertation. Images and things, again, that's where you'd have to look at the Fair Use Act. Different fields have different guidelines that they use for that. So again, that consultation with your major professor. Quotes over a certain period, if you go beyond a certain number of characters, then it's recommended, if you're using those, to obtain permission from that author to do that quotation. Graphs, charts, and things that are using verbatim, if they're not a U.S. government document, then it is recommended that you obtain copyright release. Again, that will be a final decision between you and your major professor on the Fair Use Act. But these are just types of sources. But the key thing, whether we're talking about copyright or if we're just making sure we're getting adequate credit for quotes that we're using or paraphrasing one, it's very important that you adequately document sources within your thesis, dissertation, and report.
prior publication, would you like me to go over some of that, or would you like to cover that?
Again, this is where if you have our co-author or first author, whatever within the range of authors, if that article has appeared in press or has been accepted for publication, this is one that you are required to obtain a copyright release from that publisher. And again, that can take up to 2 months or so, so start immediately, and then make sure you put in your appendix a copy of that copyright release, and that copyright release letter will also give you guidelines of how you can actually present that article within your thesis dissertation report. Sometimes they'll let you use it in its totality, and you link it with that published article in your electronic version of that journal, or sometimes they may only want you to present the abstract and then the link for your article. With your committee, you'll need to work with your major professor. The committee will want to see the whole document, but what's important relative to copyright is really what is ultimately appearing in KREX, which is our depository for thesis, dissertations, and reports.
The deadlines for graduation, as I mentioned, can be found on the graduate school website. October 1st is the deadline to have your ISIS graduation application completed. You need to do that as soon as you submit your approval form or have it completed by October 1st. November 1st is a deadline to have the approval to schedule final examination forms submitted in order to have your name appear in the commencement program. Note that even if your name does not appear in a commencement program, you can still attend commencement if you complete the deadlines by November the 29th. November the 29th is the date I just mentioned, and that is when all requirements need to be completed. This will include your final examination ballot, your ETDR ballot if you're completing an ETDR, and also the online commencement registration must be completed by this time. The online commencement registration will be sent to you in October or after, once you've submitted the approval form. There will be a live link that you will go into to actually complete that online registration to let us know you plan on attending commencement. December 9th is a deadline that you could graduate spring 2012, not have to enroll, if you have had your final examination completed and only have to have the final documents submitted. Those documents would have to be completed by December the 9th so that you could graduate May of 2012 but not have to enroll the spring 2012 semester. The page that is appearing now is the ETDR page, and on this page I think something that's very helpful for the students is the submission checklist. This is a checklist that you can go through and make certain that you have completed all requirements. And as I had mentioned, you would deliver your final examination ballot to the graduate school, deliver your ETDR ballot to the graduate school, deliver the Survey of Earned Doctorate form if you're a doctorate student. Then you would submit everything to KREX, and as a doctorate student you will also submit to UMI ProQuest. And the follow-up, such as completing the online surveys, paying the fees, and updating your information with the Alumni Association. If all of these requirements are completed by that November 29th, you would be a fall 2011 graduate. If you're completing an ETDR, you can go to the submit your ETDR to KREX, which is step number 5. That will give you step-by-step instructions on submitting your ETDR to KREX. If you need help or need to contact someone in regarding to submitting your ETDR, there is information on this page, and there's also the contact information if you have any questions regarding commencement or the graduation deadlines. We will be holding some other sessions, such as a graduation information commencement, and that will be on campus at the Leadership Studies building in the Town Hall room on October the 6th from 3:30 to 4:30. We will also have an ETDR review session that day, but it will be at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the morning, and it will go over the ETDR template and any problems that you may have, and you can ask any questions at that.
So let's capture some important reminders that you need to do. If you're a doctoral student and you plan to defend this semester, make sure when you're scheduling your final examination that you contact right now, immediately, your outside chair. The outside chair, again, is that individual who was assigned by the graduate school as your 5th or 6th member of your supervisory committee. That person is responsible for conducting the final defense for you and in the presence of your committee. So if you haven't done so, find your admission to candidacy letter or email Angie and she can look that up for you. Or you can actually look it up in ISIS if you go to your Student Information Student Center. You can go to this one button that says Other Academics, and if you pull down that, the second bullet says Committee and Milestones, and on your committee it would list who your committee members are who assign your program of study, but if you're a doctoral student, it's also going to list your outside chair. You'll want to phone or email that individual to find out their availability. And when you're getting to working with your major professor and identifying the dates, you need to contact that person. He or she should be a part of the planning process of the date and time. Do not, under any circumstances, find a date for all your committee members and your major professor and then call that individual and say, oh, by the way, all my committee members can meet at 10 o'clock on October 28th, and I look forward to seeing you there. That is not the appropriate way of engaging your outside chair. You have to make sure that they are available. The only 2 reasons that the graduate school, the dean, would replace that outside chair is, one is if that person is no longer employed at Kansas State University. Thus, I need that information immediately. So let Angie or myself know that your outside chair is no longer at K-State. You've tried to reach them and learned that they're not at K-State any longer. The second one is that the person is on sabbatical or medical leave for this semester. Those would be reasons that a replacement outside chair would need to be done. That does take time because you have to do a lot. I have to do a lot of correspondence back and forth with individuals to find one. If you find that the person's not here, you have a tentative time period within a 3-week block. You can say, my committee's relatively available during these times. That would be my preference of when to schedule that. However, if you don't do that and it comes up to the point that it's you're ready to get your approval form signed and you haven't contacted them, you may be starting all over to schedule that examination. So that's a very important thing that you need to remember as a doctoral student. Now, if you're a student that is completing an all-coursework option, you still do the approval form because there's some kind of culminating experience. It may not be a written oral examination. It may be a portfolio that you're submitting to your supervisory committee. But there's some kind of final requirements that programs have. That's what your culminating experience will. They document your successful completion of that. If you're in the College of Business and receiving your MBA or Master's of Accountancy or the College of Architecture, for most of the programs there, they have a different form, but it serves as your approval form. It's your graduation clearance form, but it does the same thing for you. It notifies Dawn or Lori that you're completing your degree, and that initiates our review and the release of a ballot to your major professor. So it's called something different, but it functions in the same role. Another very important piece of advice is check your K-State email. All correspondence that Dawn, Lori, or Angie, or myself would be sending you will be sent to your K-State email address. Once we've received your approval form and they've gone through to make sure if there's anything that's missing or you need to submit a change in program form or committee form, that is the email that is sent. It gives you the guidelines of everything you need to do in order to graduate this semester. So please check your K-State email frequently this semester, if it's your last, because of important communication about your completion, about graduation itself, commencement, so that you know what's expected and when, and where to show up for your important day of commencement. Again, remember the deadlines. Those apply to every student, and I often ask for exceptions. To be fair to everyone that's graduating, we have to stay with those deadlines in order to be consistent and fair to all students. So November the 29th is the deadline, and that applies to each and every one that plans to have a December 2011 date on their diploma. For doctoral students, if you really want to receive your diploma at graduation, it is very important that we receive your approval form by that October 1st date in order for us to order your diploma and be able to present it at the same time you're hooded for your degree. Master's students, your diplomas are mailed in January after we have to confirm all degree requirements are met after grades are submitted, and we have to do one final audit. Your diplomas then will arrive, and we will mail them to the address that you indicated on the commencement information form in ICES that is available at the Student Center. And again, go, and if you have any questions at any point, consult with your major professor, call Dawn, Lori, or Angie, send an email to gradinfo@ksu.edu, or to the ones that were previously on the first slide that Angie shared with you. Our staff is available there to answer questions and facilitate your process. However, remember, Angie cannot process and check your ETDR submission until we have that ballot. There are often times that the student thinks that ballot has been submitted and it has not. So frequent communication with your major professor is very important this last semester. Speaking of when do you get to submit your thesis or dissertation or report to your committee, that is a decision of your major professor. He or she will have reviewed the documents multiple times as you're already experiencing, but they determine whether it's meeting the program's requirement, and therefore they will tell you when it's ready for you to submit it to those individuals. But by graduate school policy, each committee member has 10 working days to review any document, any final document. At your final defense, they will determine whether or not they need to see the thesis dissertation report before they're willing to sign the ETDR ballot. So again, you've got to, when you're looking at what time do I need to have this all done in order to graduate, then you need to make sure you're allowing adequate time once your defense is over with to make all the corrections. If for some reason you don't meet the 29th deadline that you're shooting for, know that December 9th is a date that you will complete the degree requirements, but will not officially graduate until May 2012, but not have to register. Now, if you're in the job market and already employed and you need verification that you have completed your degree, at the point that we have all your documents, your approval form, your defense ballot, final ballot, and your ETDR if applicable, and those documents are submitted for doctoral students, you've got your survey of earned doctorates, ProQuest, all the things that Angie's gone through that's also on the checklist have been submitted, then you can request the graduate school to provide for you a certificate of completion. That certificate of completion will say to a prospective employer or your current employer, if potentially a raise or promotion is related to the completion of your degree, this says that all degree requirements for your degree have been completed and your official graduation date will be, May 2012 or whatever that date is. But that is a document that we can provide for you that will let those know that you have completed, but there's a delay in you receiving your diploma. The other thing to keep in mind is that it is very important to maintain open communication. Work with your supervisory committee very closely and your major professor so that you know that you're on track to graduate and meet the requirements. So communication has always been important, but it's specifically important at this time that you're trying to graduate. We wish you well, but again, Angie, any final words of advice you'd like to give the students as they're trying to meet these important deadlines and moving forth in their career as a graduate alumni of Kansas State University?
I can't think of any right offhand. The main thing is, if you ever have any questions, just make sure you get in touch with one of the three of us, and we'd be more than happy to help you.
Okay. Again, best wishes and early congratulations.